Good afternoon and welcome to Lunch Break with the Rabbi today at Tuesday, April 20th, 2021. Today is the 8th day of the month of Iyar. As we've mentioned in the past, during the weeks between Passover and Shavuos, and according to the Chabad custom, we continue all the way until Rosh Hashanah, we study ethics of our fathers. Every week another chapter. There are 6 chapters and there are 6 Saturdays between Pesach and Shavuos. So every week another chapter is discussed and studied in ethics of our fathers. What is ethics of our fathers? Just to give a brief overview before we delve into it a little bit. Ethics of our fathers is a collection of discussions by the Talmudic scholars of the first century, of the first stage of Talmudic scholars, which we call them the Mishnah. That was the first stage of the oral law. It began at the end of the Second Temple. The last few hundred years of the Second Temple is when these Talmudic scholars began, and it continued until 100 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. So we're looking about 100 BCE to continuing to year about 96. Rabbi Yehuda, the leader of the Jewish people at the time, realized that people would forget the oral law, and he documented all the discussions of the Tanaic scholars and its codifying of law into something called the Mishnah, which is 6 different main volumes, then divided into 60 different sub-tractates, each one discussing different areas and aspects of Jewish law and views of Judaism. Ethics of our fathers is different than many of them because it doesn't discuss law per se, but discusses beyond the letter of the law, how we as people should behave, not because it's necessarily documented in the law this way, but as to be a mensch, to behave something a little better than the actual law demands. And ethics of our fathers is in the Aramaic word called mili de chasudusa, the word for the kind, the word for the chassid, for one who wants to behave beyond the letter of the law. And all of us want to behave beyond the letter of the law. All of us want to be able to be that Mr. Perfect that we're not, but at least we can aspire to do that. So it doesn't only give us tips of life, of behaving beyond the letter of the law, but it also gives us tips to be able to become better people, better servants of God, and better friends, spouses, teachers, students in every shape and form. So ethics of our fathers covers a gamut of different things. And today we're going to pick from chapter 3, the opening statement, and as we call it today, the 3 life hacks. As the author of this Mishnah tells us, that if one was to look at these 3 things, they will never come to do a sin. Now, what is he telling us here? First of all, what does it mean, a sin? A sin translates, in many cases, something which some want to translate, something that God will be upset at you. In fact, the mistake is that the one who loses most out of a sin, out of any abrogation, is the person himself. God is not affected by our sin. Well, excuse me. What God did was, gave us different methods and modes that we can connect to God. Every single one of the mitzvahs that God gives us is, imagine a rope that we can connect and make the knot tight. I'm sorry, getting tongue twisted here. The knot tighter to be able to connect to God. The more mitzvahs we do, the better our relationship, or if we want to call it in today's language, the better our cell power, the better lines we have, the better bandwidth we have to get connected with God. Every time we, God forbid, do an abrogation, we are severing that relationship that we have with God. So over here, Akavya B'Mahalal gives us 3 tips in relationships. 3 tips in our relationship with God, and by extension, it works with any relationship with any person. So while he addresses it, that if we view these 3 tips, it will help us from avoiding any pitfalls in an abrogation to God, it will also help us in achieving a better relationship with any person that we want to have a relationship with, especially with God. What are his 3 tips? So he starts with number 1. The one thing you should know is, and I'll read it from the actual word of the Mishnah, and then we'll explain it. Number 1, know from where you come, know from where you go, and know eventually that you'll have to be accountable. And he starts with a saying. Know from where you come. Where does a person come from? Every single person is the same. We all come from the same putrid drop that brought us into this world, but even more so. He uses a terminology, he says, ma'ayin. We are all nothing. Don't hold yourself advantageous over anybody else. We all come from the same cloth. We all come from the same existence. We all have the same God. We all are serving the same God. Don't consider yourselves anything greater than anybody else. You're just as equal as everybody else. Now imagine that. Imagine if all of us would look at each other and say, we're exactly the same. We all come from the same thing. Yes, you had one kind of parent, I had a different kind of parent. You had one kind of upbringing, we had a different upbringing. But at the end of the day, we're all made up of the same thing. Why would I consider myself anything greater? Why would I have any type of ego? Or think that I'm far superior than somebody else? So the first step to avoiding any pitfalls is removing the ego. Once we remove the ego, then automatically you are a person who is adaptable. You are a person that can be spoken with. You're a person who can be communicated with. You're not your head in the sky. You don't think you're greater than you're God's gift to mankind. So number one step is removing the ego, is recognizing where you come from and who you are. Step number two is where you're going to go. As in the Mishnah he describes, we're all going to end up in the same place as well. A person eventually after 120 gets buried into the ground, and in the words of the Mishnah, very graphic, to a place of worms. What is he telling here again? Reminding us. You may have accomplished so much. Yes, you came from nothing. But you can say, look what I've accomplished. Look at what I've done. I'm a successful entrepreneur. I'm a doctor, a lawyer, a rabbi, whatever you name it. I want to be able to give myself accolades and say, look how wonderful I've done. Look at my accomplishments. Well, what's that going to get you? After 120, you're going to be in the same place. If all you're going to walk around is with a chip in your shoulder and not share any of that wisdom, not care about what you've done, what is that accomplishment? You worked so hard. You toil for 20 hours, 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week. To do what? To accomplish what? Which brings us to the third point. Know before whom you're going to give an account. Everything you do in this world, you got to be accountable. There's nothing that goes unnoticed. The good and the not so good. So whatever you do, recognize that you're going to be accounted for it. Don't think anything goes to waste. You may think you came from nothing. You may think you're going to end up into nothing. But what's most important is the action that we do. The activity that we do while we're here in this world can never be compensated or replaced with anything. You as the human being, given a mission in this world, you were given that God told you got to do something. And God put you here because you can do it, not I and not anybody else. And he's waiting for you to do that mission. And you're going to be accounted for. Did you or didn't you follow up to that mission that you were all to do? And the only way that you're going to be able to accomplish that mission is by remembering the first two steps. Remember, you came from nothing and you're going to end up in the worms. And the only reason why the time in between you have is because God's waiting for you to do what he gave you to do, to create that relationship, to make this world an oasis for God, for you to fulfill your mission. These three life hacks, if we just follow them, even in the smallest measure, can you imagine what our relationship with God would be like? What our relationship with our spouses, with our family, with our children, with our neighbors, what the world would be like? Removing any obstacles where we all can see each other just for who we are, for the uniqueness and specialty for who we are, the greatness in each individual, the uniqueness of every person, and also understanding and recognizing to value every moment of life that we complete our mission. And remember, our mission is not somebody else's. Nobody else can do it for us. Thank you for joining me today. Wishing you a wonderful day, a great day. And remember to join us Lag Bomer next week, Thursday, May April 29th at 6:30 p.m. for our barbecue. And sign up for our wonderful JLI course starting next Tuesday night, April 27th. Looking forward to joining you and speaking with you again tomorrow at Lunch Break with the Rabbi. Have a great day.